Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to the Tech 360 channel, and today I have for you here the all-new 70-200 f2.8 GM OSS II lens from Sony. We're gonna do a little first impressions review and take a look at what this lens is all about. Okay, so let's take a look at the lens itself and the functions on the lens. So obviously you have your focus ring right at the top. You have 3 focus hold buttons. You have your focal length adjustment ring. And this is a new addition to the previous version, which is the aperture ring. So you can now manually control the aperture right on the lens itself, which I find really useful. And there has been a couple of new additional switches from the previous version. You have your full-time DMF, which wasn't there on the previous version. You have also the on and off OSS, which if I'm not wrong, I did not see on the previous 70-200. So obviously you have your autofocus, manual focus switch, you have your focal length limiter, and also the iris lock. So this is something really interesting right here as well. There's one more switch over here, which is the clicking on and off, and what this does is that if you have it on, your aperture ring sort of has like a little click, and feels quite solid from each stop to stop. Gives you a little bit of a haptic feedback when you're shooting and you're not really looking at the aperture. But if you turn it off, everything feels really smooth. So when we're talking about the smoothness of the rings of the lens, the manual focus ring, very smooth, and obviously it's not a hard stop ring, so everything is electronic, and your focal length is also really smooth. It gives a little bit of a drag, which I kind of like. You know, if it's too smooth, it just feels really cheap. And overall, the build quality of the lens is very robust. It feels good in my hand. It's quite heavy. I don't have the exact weight of the lens yet. And obviously you have your tripod mounting option, which is removable. So overall, I feel that the build quality of the lens is obviously very good. In terms of weather sealing, I'm not exactly sure yet, because as of the recording of this video, Sony has not given me any specifications, and some of the functions of the lens I'm not even sure myself. For example, in the previous lens, you only have 2 modes, but on this lens you have a 3rd mode. So I'm quite interested to see what the different modes will do, and definitely bring it out to test after recording this video. Okay, so let's talk about image quality. So I've had this lens for less than 24 hours now, and I received it around maybe 5 PM last night. So I brought it out to shoot some architecture photos, and I was doing a little bit of long exposure just to test the image stabilization in the lens and camera itself. And I was happy to say that most of the shots were very sharp. And one thing I noticed is that when I was shooting slightly longer exposures, even though I set the camera to do a self-timer so that there was no like handshakes when I'm pressing the shutter, it still was a little bit shaky. I'm not exactly sure if it's my tripod or if it's because of the winds, but that's not to say that the lens is not good. I definitely do have to take it out more to do more further testing. And in terms of sharpness, even zooming in at 400 or 800 times zoom, it was incredibly sharp. This lens is amazing, and I'm not trying to beef this lens up because I love Sony products, but focusing at such a great distance and shooting it at 200mm, and I did test at 70mm, at 135mm, everything was very sharp, and edge to edge there was no barrel distortion or any vignetting of that sort. But obviously that was shooting at night, so I knew I had to take it out in the day, which I did just now. So I was just shooting some street shots, and the focus of this camera is absolutely insane. It was, if I dare to say, this is the fastest lens, and obviously it combined with the A1, which is not a cheap camera or not a non-professional camera by any chance. The pairing was absolutely incredible. The focus has been the fastest I have ever experienced on any lens and camera combination. You have to wait for the full review for me to actually show it on camera, but the focus, just shooting it at a restaurant with sort of like, you know, minimal restaurant lighting. It wasn't exactly dark, but it wasn't absolutely bright as well. The focus was so quick and so sharp. It didn't do any hunting as of now. Testing this lens so far, there was no hunting at all. I've yet to test it out doing street or product photography late at night where there's minimal lighting. That might change, but as of now, first impressions wise, I have not had any issues with autofocus of this lens. One thing that I wanted to point out as well is chromatic aberration. So For me, when I'm testing lenses, this is something that I try to point out if there is chromatic aberration. So chromatic aberration is something that you'll notice in a lot of cheaper lenses. You have sort of like a color fringing around the edges, but this 70-200 lens, there is chromatic aberration, but it's almost negligible and only very evident when you're shooting against like white edges and zooming in really tight on the subject. For example, I only noticed it really when I was shooting a staircase, and around the edges of the handrails there was like this slight magenta, which was almost negligible. So honestly, just looking at it zoomed out, I wasn't able to see it, but of course I was just trying to test the lens, so just zooming in to check if there was any chromatic aberration. But I'm happy to say that this lens has very minimal chromatic aberration at all. And I did another test, which is I wanted to test how good the OSS was on this lens. I was in my room and I was shooting my nano leaf remote. So I was just trying to focus on the number 10 on the remote, and I tried to push it a little bit further than as expected of a normal lens. So pairing with the A1 and the new 70-200 lens, I do not know the exact specifications of how many stops that would achieve in image stabilization, but shooting it at 1/20th of a second, I was still able to get a very sharp photo, which would be a bit problematic for some camera systems out there. But with this lens and the camera combination, that was very easy, I would say. But of course, I had to try and push it even further. So I started to get a bit of difficulty getting a steady shot when I was shooting at 1/13th of a second. There were times where I shot it perfectly focused or sharp, but that required a lot of steadiness in my hands. So take note that this test was done handheld, so I didn't put it on a tripod. And I have to say that it just goes to show how much the lens has improved in terms of image stabilization, inbuilt image stabilization in the lens. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed my first impressions review of this lens so far. Obviously, the lens has to be put through a lot more testing, and I definitely want to try and do some panning shots with this to see if the image stabilization is as good as I've tested it so far. And obviously the autofocus, I want to try and push it to the limit to see if it ever hunts. As of now, it has never hunted and it has never missed a spot. I hope you guys enjoyed this first impressions review from me. And as always, subscribe to our channel and follow us on all our social media platforms. And if you want to as well, you can find me on Instagram at Mamba. And that'll do it for me, and I'll see you guys in the next one.